Welcome to the Bible Study Hour, a radio and internet ministry of the Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals, featuring the Bible teaching of Dr. James Boyce. For more information, please contact us by calling toll-free 1-800-488-1888. And now the Alliance is pleased to present the Bible Study Hour, preparing you to think and act biblically.
When I introduced Psalm 139 last week, which we began to study then, one of the things I said is that it's made up of four perfectly balanced stanzas. The first of the four stanzas has to do with God's omniscience. I'm not sure I defined some of these theological terms adequately a week ago, but omniscience means that God knows all things. Omni has to do with all or everything, and the latter part of it, like our word science, it has to do with knowledge. So omniscience means that God knows all things, and that's what the first verses are about, verses 1 through 6. And then the second major portion of the psalm has to do with God's omnipresence. That's another compound word, omni meaning all, and presence meaning presence. He's everywhere, all places. And then the third portion of the psalm has to do with omnipotence. Now, potence means power, and so it means that God is all-powerful. And then I pointed out that the last...
He's talking about, this is James Boyce, great expositor. He's talking about Psalm 139. And I've done one part of the psalm listening to Boyce, and we're doing the last part of Psalm 139. So after about 10 minutes I'll share my own thoughts of what he's saying. Alright.
Section of this, the fourth of these four major sections of the psalm, indicates the response that the psalmist, in this case David, has to all of the above. What's he going to do? How's he going to think? Now that he knows that God is truly all-knowing, all-present, and all-powerful. Now, I also said last week that there is a sense in which the psalm is really only about the omniscience of God, because the other things that are brought in chiefly because they support that first observation. Why is it that God knows all things? Well, one answer to that is because God is everywhere to see and know it. And so when David begins to talk about the omnipresence of God in the second of these sections, it's in order to explain the great quality of God's knowledge that he has introduced at the beginning. But now I need to say that he also brings in the third of these doctrines for the same reason, talking about God's power, his omnipotence. The reason he brings that in is because he's saying God knows everything, in my case particularly, because God has made everything. And he's made me. And so he has the knowledge of what he has made in the same way that a person that manufactures an object understands it better than anybody else. Now that's the theological subject matter. You have to remember, however, that this is also a worship psalm. And we've been talking about that, and what that means is that we're not going to find in this psalm more or less abstract reflections on God's omniscience and omnipresence, and in the section that we're dealing with today is omnipotence. There is a place for that, and we do find it other places in the Scripture, but what we're going to find is that from David's perspective, in this psalm at least, all of this is personal. He is thinking here where he talks about the power of God, not just of that abstract power that obviously enabled God to create the universe, but particularly the power of God that created him, forming him, as he says, when he was still in the womb of his mother. No wonder God knows me. He says God made me. That's why he knows me. And moreover, he knew me from the very beginning, the very first moments of my existence as I began to form. Now, these are beautiful words. They're worth reading. Here's what he says. You created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. Now, we want to look at that personally to see what it has to do with us, but I don't think we can go on to do that without recognizing that this does have great bearing upon what is perhaps the greatest single moral issue of our day. That is the issue of abortion. It's an important issue because it has to do with life and death, and not only that, the life and death of the most helpless individuals in any society, that is the unborn. David isn't thinking about abortion, of course. Nothing could be further from his mind, but you can't read these verses thoughtfully today without realizing that they do have direct, very important bearing upon the subject. Now, let me just take a little bit of time to think about it. What is the major issue, the chief issue in the abortion question today? It's not how we use our tax money. The issue in the abortion battle today is simply this: is the embryo a human being? Now, people who want to argue for the woman's right to have abortion are working against that, of course. They want to be able to say, it's my body, I can do with it whatever I like, and so they want to argue that the fetus, the developing child, is not really a person, but something else. And they change the language in order to handle that and make it more acceptable. In past ages, every woman understood that she was carrying a baby. People talked about babies. It's rather hard to think about killing babies. And so we change the language and we talk about embryos and fetuses and sometimes even tissue. It's not hard to remove tissue. It's even easier than having a gallbladder out or removing an appendix. And so we change the language to make that kind of acceptable. Now, the Bible does not use that language. That is not the way the Bible talks about the unborn child. What is more, medical knowledge, as it's developed, disabuses us of that kind of facile language. You ask the question, when does the embryo become a human being? Well, people have speculated on that for a long time. Aristotle, great Greek philosopher, had some ideas about it. He said the embryo becomes a human being when it first quickens in the womb of the mother. That is, when it begins to move and the mother feels it. Well, that seems to be an easy answer, except that we know today that the fetus is moving even before that. It's moving from the very beginning. It's almost always moving, and certainly before the mother feels it. People would say, well, it becomes a human being when it's able to survive outside the womb. That seems like a good answer, except that because of medical ability today, we're able to have babies survive which are very, very tiny, certainly those that are younger than those who are actually aborted. We say, well, it has to do with brain waves. That's the way we tell whether we really have a human being alive today, whether the brain waves cease today. It's the way we define death. Must have to do with brain waves, but the developing child has brain waves from the very, very earliest moments, certainly long before the mother even knows she's pregnant. Not only
on abortion, I don't understand why in Western society that we think it's okay to do that. To me, it just defies belief that we can run around and say, let's save the fox, let's save the bulls from being attacked in Spain, but yet we don't say, let's save the baby in the womb. To me, it's crazy.